When the HOA raised my fees by $350 for having too many cars, I was furious. They claimed I broke the rules, but I didn't. Soon I discovered the HOA president wanted my house for his son. Little did he know, I'd soon own the entire neighborhood and make him regret ever messing with me. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. I never planned to buy an entire neighborhood. That wasn't exactly on my bucket list. But life takes unexpected turns, and when opportunity knocks, sometimes you answer. My name is Alex Martinez. 10 years ago, I was just a regular guy who worked hard and saved carefully. I had a good job as a real estate developer, but I wasn't rich by any means. I lived in Maple Creek Estates, a quiet suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-kept homes. It was peaceful, until the day I got that letter from the homeowners association. It started on a Friday evening. I had just come home from work, tired after a long week. The mail was in a neat pile on my kitchen counter, sorted by my roommate. Among the usual bills and advertisements was an official-looking envelope from the Maple Creek HOA. Great, I muttered. What do they want now? I opened it and found a notice that my HOA fees were being increased by $350 per month, effective immediately. The reason? Excessive vehicle presence on property. I read the letter twice, thinking there must be some mistake. I had 3 cars: my daily driver, a modest Honda, a project car I was restoring on weekends, an old Mustang, and my work truck that I occasionally brought home. According to the HOA rules, I was allowed 2 vehicles visibly parked. The Mustang was always in my garage, out of sight. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the letter. Maple Creek HOA, this is Victoria speaking. Hi Victoria, this is Alex Martinez from 1422 Oakwood Drive. I just received a notice about an increase in my fees, and I think there's been a mistake. Oh yes, Mr. Martinez. That's no mistake. The board voted on it last week. You consistently have too many vehicles on your property. But I don't. My project car is always in the garage. I only have 2 vehicles visible at any time, which is within the rules. Well, Victoria's voice turned cold. We've received several reports and photographs showing 3 vehicles at your residence multiple times. The board has made its decision. Who's sending these reports? I demand to see them. I'm afraid that information is confidential, Mr. Martinez. The fee increase stands. Have a nice weekend. She hung up before I could respond. I was furious. $350 might not sound like much to some people, but it was a significant amount to me. And more importantly, I wasn't breaking any rules. The next morning, I went to speak with my neighbors. Most were sympathetic but couldn't offer any help. Then I knocked on the door of Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly woman who lived across the street and seemed to know everything that happened in the neighborhood. Oh, Alex, she said, inviting me in for tea. I was wondering when you'd come by. This whole situation is ridiculous. Do you know who might be reporting me, Mrs. Jenkins? She stirred her tea thoughtfully. Well, I shouldn't gossip, but have you met our HOA president, Richard Thornton? Only at the annual meeting. Why? Richard lives in the big house at the end of the street. He's particular about the neighborhood's appearance. And she leaned in conspiratorially, I've seen him walking by your house and taking pictures with his phone. Why would he do that? Because, dear, his son is looking to buy in the neighborhood, and your house is exactly what they're after. A corner lot with the extra-large garage. Things suddenly made more sense. This wasn't about rules, it was about pushing me out. Monday evening, I attended the HOA meeting. When the floor opened for resident comments, I stood up. I'd like to address the fee increase I received, I said firmly. I've reviewed the HOA bylaws thoroughly, and I'm not in violation. Richard Thornton, a thin man with silver hair and expensive glasses, looked down at me from the board table. Mr. Martinez, we have photographic evidence of 3 vehicles at your property on multiple occasions. May I see this evidence? Richard nodded to Victoria, who handed me a folder. Inside were photos of my driveway with 3 vehicles, but the third wasn't mine. It was my neighbor Jim's truck, who occasionally parked in front of my house when visiting. This isn't my vehicle, I explained. This belongs to a visitor, which is allowed under Section 5.3 of the bylaws. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. The board has interpreted visitor vehicles to mean temporary parking, not regular occurrences. Jim Parker's truck is there at least twice a week. That's not in the written rules, I protested. The board has discretion to interpret the rules as needed, Victoria chimed in. I looked around at the other board members. None would meet my eyes except one, Elena Rodriguez, who looked uncomfortable. This is unfair, I said. And I think it's targeted harassment. Richard's face flushed. That's enough, Mr. Martinez. The decision stands. Next item on the agenda? After the meeting, Elena approached me in the parking lot. I'm sorry about what happened in there, she said quietly. For what it's worth, I voted against the increase. Thank you, I said. But one vote doesn't help much. She glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Look, there's something you should know. The developer who built this neighborhood, Westfield Properties, is looking to sell off the remaining undeveloped lots and their ownership stake. I don't see how that helps me. Richard has been trying to get his hands on that stake for months. He wants control of the whole neighborhood. If someone else bought it? She let the implication hang in the air. Someone like me? I laughed. I can barely afford my increased HOA fees, let alone buy property. Elena handed me a business card. Just talk to them. The developer is desperate to sell. There might be a way. The next day I called the number on the card. To my surprise, they agreed to meet with me. The meeting with Westfield Properties was eye-opening. They were indeed desperate to sell, and the price was much lower than I expected. They still owned 40% of the neighborhood, all the undeveloped lots plus the community centers and parks. The thing is, explained Mr. Davis, the company representative, we've been trying to sell for years, but the HOA, especially Richard Thornton, keeps creating obstacles. He wants to buy it himself at a fraction of its worth. How can he do that? By making it unattractive to other buyers. He's been blocking every improvement proposal, citing HOA rules. The property value has dropped significantly. I thought about my own situation. He seems to like using the rules to get what he wants. Exactly. We've had enough. We're ready to sell to anyone but him, even at a loss. An idea began forming in my mind. What if I put together a group of investors? Most of the homeowners here aren't happy with the HOA leadership. Mr. Davis smiled. That would work. And I'll tell you what, if you can get enough people together quickly, we'll give you a discount. I spent the next week talking to my neighbors. Many were frustrated with the HOA but feared retaliation if they opposed Richard openly. However, when presented with the opportunity to own a stake in their neighborhood, several were interested. Mrs. Jenkins was the first to invest. It's about time someone stood up to that man, she said, writing a check. Jim Parker, whose truck had been used against me, was next. Elena secretly connected me with other dissatisfied homeowners. I also called some former colleagues from my real estate days. Within 2 weeks, I had enough commitments to make an offer. The deal closed quietly a month later. Westfield Properties sold their 40% stake to our newly formed company, Maple Creek Residents Coalition. On paper, I was the majority shareholder, though many neighbors had invested what they could. The best part? Richard had no idea. Westfield had kept the buyer's identity confidential at my request. As far as he knew, some anonymous investor had purchased the stake. Meanwhile, my HOA fee increase remained in effect. I paid it without further complaint, which seemed to satisfy Richard. He probably thought he was winning. 3 months later, it was time for the annual HOA meeting, where board positions would be up for election. Richard had been president for 5 years running, with no one brave enough to challenge him. I arrived early and sat in the front row. Richard nodded at me dismissively as he organized his papers at the podium. The meeting proceeded as usual until Victoria announced, "Now we'll move to board elections." Richard stood up. As there are no other nominations, I motion that the current board continues for another term. I raised my hand. I'd like to nominate myself for president. A murmur ran through the room. Richard laughed. Mr. Martinez, board members must be in good standing without any rule violations. I've paid all my fees increased as they were, I replied calmly. Victoria checked her records and nodded reluctantly. Richard shrugged. Very well. We'll put it to a vote, though I should remind everyone of my track record of maintaining property values. Before we vote, I said, standing up, I'd like to make a statement. Richard frowned but nodded. I took a deep breath. As many of you know, Westfield Properties sold their ownership stake in Maple Creek Estates 3 months ago. What you may not know is who bought it. I paused, looking directly at Richard, whose expression was turning from confusion to concern. The Maple Creek Residents Coalition now owns 40% of this neighborhood, including all undeveloped land and common areas. And as the majority shareholder of that coalition, I effectively control that 40%. The room erupted in whispers. Richard's face paled. What's more, I continued, According to our neighborhood charter, that 40% ownership comes with 40% of the voting power in HOA decisions. Victoria frantically flipped through a binder, then whispered something to Richard. He looked stunned. "That's not possible," he stammered. "It's not only possible, it's done," I replied. "And my first proposal as a major stakeholder is to return all unfairly increased fees to the residents and revise the vehicle policy to be more reasonable." The room broke into applause. Richard tried to regain control, but it was too late. When the vote for president was called, it wasn't even close. My first act as HOA president was to comb through all fee increases from the past year and reverse those that seemed targeted or unfair. Richard had been using fee hikes as a weapon against anyone who opposed him or owned property he coveted. Next, we revised the rules to be clearer and more reasonable. No more interpretations that suited personal agendas. As for Richard, he sold his house and moved away within 6 months. Ironically, I bought his property at below market value. It had a lovely view of the park, which was now properly maintained with the HOA funds that were no longer going into administrative expenses. The undeveloped lots were turned into community gardens, a playground, and an area where residents could work on their cars without fear of fines. Jim's truck became a regular fixture in front of various houses as he helped neighbors with home improvement projects. Today marks my 1-year anniversary as HOA president. The neighborhood is thriving. Property values are up, not because we're exclusive, but because we're a genuine community where people want to live. Mrs. Jenkins brought her famous apple pie to our celebration in the newly renovated community center. "You know," she said, serving me the first slice, "when I gave you that investment money, I never imagined things would turn out so well." "Neither did I admitted. "I just wanted to stop the fees. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even," she winked. "It's making things better." She's right. I never planned to buy a neighborhood or become an HOA president. But sometimes life's best opportunities come disguised as problems. As for those 3 cars that started everything, I still have them. And now nobody cares.